You mentioned the Weimar economic collapse. Now,
Yeah.
do you think that was an engineered collapse? And if
Oh, sure.
so, do you think that America is on that same path? And are we going to have an
Sure.
engineered economic collapse? And at the same time, while you're answering all of that, is there already somebody picked out that's going to be that strong man, that savior waiting in the wings like Hitler was?
Well, what you have to understand is the power elite isn't just like, okay, we got Obama and the Democrats. They really have their people groomed from a young age in both major political parties. And as I said, Skull and Bones and these guys are in on that too. That particular part of the sort of conspiracy was by the Whitney family in the late 1800s. William Whitney and his son, their part of the plan was that they would contribute heavily to both political parties financially, and then they would alternate power. So the stupid people would think they have a choice. And you can find that again in Carroll Quigley's work, Tragedy and Hope, in 1966. He says basically the same thing. The public's too stupid to know what to do, and you should alternate power without really changing things that much. And your listeners, if they don't know who Quigley is, he's Bill Clinton's mentor. Quigley and the Dulles brothers' son, Avery Dulles. Avery Dulles had changed to become a Catholic, and he was at Georgetown University, and he and Quigley saw to it that this young guy from Hope, Arkansas, Bill Clinton, became a Rhodes Scholar, because he was planned back then to become president, down the road. And he was. And that's why George H.W. Bush lost on purpose in 1992. You said, what, George Bush lost on purpose? Yeah, he had to lose on purpose. So, they have an agreement, I'll lose, and then my kid, George W., will come along, and you elect him. But the reason George H.W. Bush, who was also, a puppet of the power elite, went along with this was that they needed enough Democrat votes to get NAFTA and then GATT, which was part of the power elite's controlling economic global mechanism. And they had some Republican votes to go for NAFTA and GATT, but they needed Democrat votes because Democrats, labor unions, they were largely against it. So they needed Bill Clinton in there to twist enough Democrat senators' arms to approve NAFTA, because NAFTA and GATT were really, really, really important. You say, well, how do you know this is important? Well, another Rhodes Scholar, Richard Gardner, in the April 1974 issue of Foreign Affairs, which is the CFR, Council of Foreign Relations magazine, wrote an article back then called The Hard Road to World Order. And in there he said, what we'll do is, instead of the old-fashioned frontal attack, we'll do an end run around national sovereignty. An end run around national sovereignty instead of the old-fashioned frontal attack will get us further along to our new world order, a house of world order. And then he explained in that same article how they would use GATT to do it. Now, that's like 20, 30 years before GATT's even, passed by Congress. So this planning goes way, way back. And so the plan for now, just like Obama was planned. Obama just didn't happen along. Obama is, a young fellow. He's at Occidental College, and Occidental College is a small college, but it's key to a lot of things. Like when I was in the Reagan administration, the first council member of the Presidential Commission that I worked for back then, he was head of Occidental College, and so he's at Occidental College, and they watch him. They watch him carefully, and they plan that this guy is going to be useful to us. He'll be the first black president, so forth. This is like 30 years in advance, right? And so he's deliberately sent to Columbia University to attend to college after Occidental, and so he transfers to Columbia University, and they interviewed about 400 members of his major class, seniors major class, in his field of interest, and they can't remember the guy. They can't remember Obama in any classes. Where's Obama who? Barack who? However, they do remember there was a lot of people who said, oh yeah, Barack, yeah, he's spending a lot of time with Brzezinski. Now, this is a college kid, and he's spending a lot of time with Brzezinski there, at Columbia in New York. Now, 2 plus 2 equals 4. See, when you spend a lot of time as a young person with Brzezinski, you're being groomed. It's not just that you want to, but Brzezinski is putting up with you, as a young college kid for all this time. So he's being groomed, and he took a side trip, remember, to Pakistan. This is back in the day when, why do you want to who wants to go to Pakistan, back in the 1980s? It's sort of like Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, when the Soviet Union was still the evil empire, he was a Rhodes Scholar over in London, and he took a side trip to Moscow. You know, what's a Rhodes Scholar American taking a side trip to the capital of the evil empire? I mean, what's he doing over there? Well, that's part of his assignment. It goes away. So anyway, these two guys, Quigley and Avery Dulles, were the ones who got Bill Clinton his Rhodes Scholarship. And why I mentioned Quigley is Quigley loved the power elite. His book, Tragedy and Hope, is about the power elite. The hope in the title, Tragedy and Hope, the hope is for these power elite. He loved these guys. He thought the public's too stupid to know what to do. And so because of that, they let him, Quigley, in the early 1960s, look at what he called the secret records. And so a friend of mine, when Quigley had been interviewed by the Washington Post, gave me the tapes of the interview. He said, well, how'd your friend get the tapes of the interview? Well, what happened was the Post wrote a column after interviewing Quigley, and they titled it, the Washington Post, about Quigley, Bill Clinton's mentor. They titled this article, quote, "The Professor Who Knew Too Much." Quigley knew too much, end quote. So a year later, Quigley dies, you know. These things happen. So Quigley dies, and the friend of mine went to Quigley's wife and said, hey, can I buy his stuff? And she said, okay, sure, okie dokie. And so she sold him everything, including the tapes, including the secret society membership list from the 1890s. And so I've got that stuff. And so, so all of this stuff is planned. And so in my last chapter of the book, The Parallel to History and Future, or actually the next to last chapter, I go through the future. And I said, okay, the alternation of power looks like this. Barack Obama screws up over and over again, and by the final year, 2016, the economy isn't doing so well because they've gotten us into a global economy, and that means if Greece goes under, that affects the European Union, which affects us. And even if we're doing okay, it doesn't matter. These things are also interconnected. There's a domino effect, right? That's how the 2008 crisis developed to a global crisis. And so things will get so bad that the public say, oh, we had enough of this. We must elect a Republican. And so the plan, but now remember, Jeb Bush, for example, would be ideal. But he's not the only one. It's not like he's their only candidate. They have a variety of candidates. But anyway, so Jeb Bush comes in and he wins, and he tries valiantly to save the economy, but oops, we just can't quite make it. And so the plan is for a world currency by 2018. So the economic collapse, sort of. I mean, it won't be total collapse. They don't want a total collapse because they want to have something to control. They don't want to just destroy everything. So what you have is the dollar becomes less and less valued. The yen, the yuan, the pound, the lira, the mark, all this sort of stuff is so debased and debauched and worth nothing. Like it's almost like Zimbabwe currency, where you have to have a million, bazillion, whatever to buy a loaf of bread over there. So it becomes so worthless. It's still around. The dollar will still be around, but it becomes so devalued that the only way to maintain global financial, economic stability is to have a single world currency. And so that'll show up, the plan is, in 2018. You say, Cuddy, how do you know 2018? Well, if you know where to look, you can find this stuff. So, for example, if you look at the January 9th, 1988 cover of The Economist magazine, that's a British publication hooked up with British intelligence, on the cover it says, world currency plan for 2018. Pencil in the Phoenix. They're going to call it the Phoenix. Why? Because it'll rise from the economic ashes of the past. So pencil in the Phoenix for 2018. That's 30 years in advance, 1988 plan for 2018. You say, well, that's just one thing. No. In my book, I put at least a couple of other more recent conferences of the G8 where they say the same thing. It's like about 2013, there was a conference. They said, yeah, it looks like 2018's roughly when we'll have this world currency. Now, all these other currencies will still be around, but they'll use for international transactions this new world currency, probably called the Phoenix. And then, just like a lot of people in Europe switch to the euro from their own, the franc or the mark or whatever. And gradually what will happen is people will go more and more from their own national currency to this global currency. So that's planned for 2018. And then what will happen is through some, crisis in 2020, Jeb Bush or whoever will be reelected. And then in 2024, you have the alternation of power. And then time in 2024 at the end, in November, becoming president in 2025 will be a a liberal woman, first president woman, Democrat, will be elected president then. So you have your alternation of power, you have your first woman, and she'll be a New Ager, but she won't call herself a New Ager. What she'll say is, can't we all agree? Muslims, Jews, Christians, Catholics, aren't there things we can all agree on and just live, sort of the Rodney King, right? Can't we all just sort of live together? And so that's the way she'll present herself, and she'll be elected, and that's your alternation of power moving forward. You say, well, why then? Well, because in 1933, Alice Bailey, who's the leading occultist at the time, early 20th century in the world, said in 1933 that the world government would be taking rapid shape by 2025. See, it's like 90 years in advance. You say, well, how can anybody know this stuff 90 years in advance? Well, they do. For example, Robert Hugh Benson in 1907 wrote Lord of the World, 1907. And in 1907, this guy said in 1917, the communist movement will come to the fore, like it did 10 years after that. And they said in 1989 will be the Western scheme of free trade, NAFTA again. And they said 1998 there will be ministers of euthanasia, Jack Kevorkian and all that sort of stuff. So way in advance they have all this stuff sort of laid out and the timetable for all of this stuff. And so that's what I'm thinking. 2025 it'll be taking the final world government taking rapid shape. It won't be complete, but it'll be taking rapid shape, and that'll be your first woman New Age leader, liberal Democrat president at that stage. And so that's what the near future looks like.